Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. There it is. I hit the button. The train is leaving the station. I'm excited. It's like I'm on the roller coaster, and you guys don't know who I'm talking to yet, but I'm really excited. Why? Because she is an absolute badass. She is constantly on podcasts. She's got her own podcast. She's one of the most requested people you can imagine. Who is she though? She's an entrepreneur. She is a leader, a thought leader, an author, a podcast host. Serial entrepreneur, honestly, all these things, award-winning Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Why is she even here? How is she talking to me? Let's go. I have no idea. She's the host of the Fascinating Entrepreneurs podcast, which you definitely need to check out. Link is in the notes. Her book, Relentless, From Homeless Teen to Achieving the Entrepreneur Dream. Gonna have to add that. I just found out about that. Founder of Memoir Sherpa, Natasha Miller. Welcome.
Casey, thank you.
How are we even? I don't even know what. You're so busy. There's so many exciting things going on here.
I do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. And I wanted to do this.
Hell yeah. And I am grateful. So let's get right to it. I'm going to stop talking and ask you this question where we start the show and ask everyone this question. Mm-hmm. And as an extensive podcaster and a podcast guest, I can't wait to hear your answer. Pull back the curtain for us on your show and share your most important strategy for a great podcast.
I think the most important strategy to have a great podcast is to really know and think about what your listener really wants to hear. Mm-hmm. And for me, I try to run my podcast more of a journalistic approach where I'm not chiming in with my own stories and my own accolades and trying to shine the light and turn the mirror around to myself. I'm really trying to get the most out of the guest for the listener. And, I am also the demographic of the listener. So I'm interviewing entrepreneurs that do $1 million minimum in annual recurring revenue and have full-time employees. So I have a pretty specific demographic. And a lot of people these days are having a lot of contractors, and I just interviewed someone. I took off on a tangent and I interviewed her because she has a $10 million company with no employees. So I might have to change my parameters, but we talk about company culture, core values, but sure. I ask some questions that people don't usually ask people and people don't usually want to answer. And I don't ever put anyone on the spot. And also I allow the guest to say, I want to edit that out. So I'm not ever trying to railroad someone, but I am trying to get down to the things that I want to know and what I'm assuming that my listeners want to know.
Right. Because you are your listeners. I think it's so important. Has it always been that way? And were you thinking about that deliberately?
Yeah.
And because you do that, do you not have to worry about them as much? Because it's like, if you're interested, they are?
I think so. One of the things that we as business people and entrepreneurs talk a lot about, and it's very revered, is revenue. And no one pretty much is willing to talk about real profit. Like, what is their real bottom line? They can talk about it hypothetically. They can talk about it in like what they want to achieve, but not many people are willing to say, yeah, my net income last year was $50,000. You know what I mean? And a lot of those Inc. 5000 companies, I'm one of them. I've been on it for 3 times in a row. You see their revenue, but you do not see the bottom line. And I think both are important. Now, do I ask everybody what their profit margin is, their gross profit or their net? No, I don't. But I do ask some people that I know would be primed to be able to lay it out.
Tough questions, right? Talk to me about tough questions. How do you know they're capable of answering them? Do you prep them in advance? Now, I will say we didn't do a prep call, right?
Yeah, I
So
don't.
do you do prep calls?
No.
How do you know if you can ask these questions of people?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know for sure. And let's talk about the prep call. So
Yeah.
when a guest is booked on the show, whether I invite them or they pitch me and I accept them on the show, sometimes they or their people will say, well, what should they be prepared for? What questions will you ask them? And my response is just a bit sassy, kind of like I am. I'm like, listen to a couple of shows, figure it out yourself. Like, don't make me do more work. And there aren't set questions, but you can get the gist of what will be asked if you listen to the show. And if you are a guest on a show, you should be willing to at least listen to part of one of the podcast episodes that you're on. Now, whether that's before or after, it's, before is better, after is fine.
Yeah.
And then doing that host, a source of gratitude in rating and reviewing and subscribing. I think it's professional etiquette. And I don't know how many people are really doing that. It's extra steps, but what you're receiving as a guest is a potentially incredible gift. And so I just think it's the right thing to do.
Love that. So many cool. This is what I love about this podcast is that there's everything you just said, like 3 amazing topics. I'd love to go down each of these different rabbit holes. The idea of guest etiquette. You brought up the idea of writing, reviewing. I had one guest on who at the end of the show, I'm thanking them and they thanked me back and like told my listeners to go rate the show or to send me an email and say that they like the show. And I was like, that was so nice. And I sort of picked that up and I started doing that to other people's shows just to be thankful.
I might do that too. I'm going to take it right from you, who you took it right from them. As far as how to know, I'm going to give you a specific thing. There is an editor of Entrepreneur Magazine that I had on my show. His name is Jason Pfeiffer. And I know Jason as a really nice, sweet, giving, teaching kind of person when I see him in person. But on social media, he is ruthless. And he will post pitches from people and then totally tear them down.
Yeah, that sounds like my kind of guy. I love that.
I don't love it. I think it's really quite jarring for me.
Yeah, I don't think I do that, but
especially the juxtaposition of the person I know in person and then this. So I took a huge, I guess you would say, Entrepreneur Magazine writes about me, and I actually sometimes write for that magazine. If I offend the editor-in-chief on a live podcast, I could be blacklisted unofficially. But I asked Jason in that podcast, and I was willing to take the chance to kind of put him on the spot and let him know, you don't have to answer this question and we can edit it if you want. And he was like, no. So he was very giving and teaching like he is on this side. And I'm like, why do you do that? It feels kind of bad. And he explained why he did it. And honestly, I'm not going to tell you why. You have to listen to the episode on my podcast.
Right.
But he was forgiving and didn't seem to be upset or anything, but who knows?
You told that to him live, like you prefaced the question by saying,
yes,
Mrs. might be a tough one. Please don't be mad at me. You don't have to answer it and we can edit it out. So all the things.
And I left all that in the podcast. So you hear that exchange of me saying, yeah, might get, into editorial trouble, but I really want to know this. Like, why are you doing this?
And I think in a way that works because it's that realism that we all wanted anyways. We got so sick of CNN and all these like curated, we want to hear the ums and the, oh, wow, she sounds kind of nervous asking this question. Must be a really good question. I think we've missed that.
Well, I didn't miss that on that one.
No, so he answered it.
Yes. And I couldn't not ask it. There was something about how much that affected me that I just couldn't do that to myself. And I couldn't do that to my audience. I was willing to go down in flames for that. But again, I didn't want to make him look bad.
Right.
It was really, truly, why are you doing this?
Right.
And his
So yeah.
response
Okay.
makes sense. And again, teaser, listen to the episode and you can find out.
So good. Have you ever had that not work out well?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
So
I don't know, I've been on the air for like 75 episodes. So
yeah,
it's not been like years and years and years. And I
sure. It's
know
a lot of episodes though.
when and who I can, ask those questions of. And I'm not going to ask them of people that I don't really care about the answer. So it's very curated.
Tell me about that. The idea of not asking a question you don't want to know or care about the answer about.
If I don't really care about the answer, then I don't think that probably my audience cares. And for instance, we do ask our guests, what would you like to talk about? Because I do want to honor what they want to talk about, but that doesn't mean I'll necessarily ask them about it. If it
Mhm.
doesn't resonate with me, if I don't think my audience will care, I just skip right through it.
Got it. Okay. Well, I love the shift to more of a timeline question of the idea of like what you do before to start, middle, and the end of the show. It's kind of
Mhm.
tactical, but kind of
Mhm.
relating to what we're just talking about now. And I know I outed you. I hope it's okay about the no prep call, because
Yeah,
it's just
no,
it's an exploration of like, you're
absolutely.
busy, no prep call, and I
Mhm.
need to be able to. And I also said yes for a reason, because I wanted to talk to you.
You wanted to
But
talk to the girl who was like, yeah, I'm not doing a prep call with you. I'm sure you were like, I want to see what this is about.
well, I have a former boss who's like a thought leader now, who said he wouldn't do it, and I decided not to interview him. So, so if you're out there,
That's
Eric,
funny.
sorry, man. Uh, uh, but that being said, do you, just like a no bake cookie? Do you have like a no prep? Do you
Yeah,
spend like 5 minutes untaped beginning? Tell me
no,
about that.
I don't, because what I'm doing again is more journalistic and less relation. Like I'm not for the podcast that I have at this point, the thought of having the podcast wasn't a funnel into one of my programs or coaching programs or my book or my core business. And I feel like I do enough research about the person that I don't need a warm up. I don't, some of the calls that I've had with, professionals, I wished, and I do coach them. Like if you and I got on a call, we did not do any prep, but your lighting wasn't good and you didn't have a professional microphone. I did this with a guy that had a $2 billion company. I was like, no, you're going to shut the blinds behind you and you're going to go to another office in your room and get a light and stick it 1.5 feet in front of you, a little bit to the side. And you don't have a professional microphone, but I bet you have earbuds. So go get those. And I wouldn't have done the podcast had he not done that. We would reschedule.
Got it. And what I've seen is all the notices and the emails and the calendars in the world won't get people to do that, which is why I've done preps. But I actually respect the idea of being like, look, here's my audio standard for your listeners. I'm not going to, settle. I'm not going to compromise.
Yeah. I don't want to put somebody in a bad light. I don't want their
That too.
interview to
Yeah.
sound jumbled and, look like they're in the witness protection plan. I want to shine the best light on them. And of course, that relates to me as well. I want to have a really well-produced show. As far as the pre-calls, I've found that some podcasters have them to get a vibe check. That's cool. I don't have time for that right now. If you want to get a vibe check, just like Google my name on YouTube and you're going to see who I am. I'm not different for anyone or any situation. If you want to get a professional, like can she speak on a podcast? Does she have the right equipment? Again, Google me. But this is a reason why a lot of podcasters want to do a pre-call. And I'm not sure if it's most of them, but they want to begin a business relationship and sell to that guest. And I'm not opposed to that. If somebody says, hey, I want to book you on my podcast, can we have a pre-call so I can tell you about my business? Right? Let's
Right.
just be
Like, call it
honest
what it
about it.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's my belief, for me, I don't need a pre-call. So there's that. And then as far as me as a podcaster and the guest, I feel like I can mold and sculpt my guests and kind of, do wizardry to make everything happen the way I want it to. And that's a gift, right? Is to be able to meet the person kind of where they are. If they have lots of energy, I can have lots of energy. Or if I need them to tone down, I can speak in a little bit lower voice and, I can, so there's a little bit of wizardry that happens.
Guesting wizardry. That's really interesting. And I also love how every now and then some of these topics make me like nervous inside, because it's like, well, she hasn't told me to tone down yet. And yes, you are correct. You don't need a pre-call. I think some people do, but you certainly don't. And then the question is for the podcaster, do I make that call? And I certainly did. And to your point, you can research them and find that out. Tell me about the research you do. It's not done on a prep. It's done offline yourself, or you're Googling. What kind of things you doing?
So it depends on if I have reached out to the person and I wanted, I invited them on the show. If I know them at any level, right? Even if it's superficially, or if they have been brought in, I do more research with people if they've been brought in, if they've asked to be on my podcast, and especially if they are being pitched by a podcast pitch agency. So I'm looking at what they want to talk about, what their area of expertise is. And then I kind of dig down in LinkedIn and a Google search, and I don't take that much time to find elements that might be of interest to me that aren't in the bio, that don't relate to the core business, and aren't in the questions that they said that they can speak to. So I'm looking for an interesting tidbit or gem. And sometimes I don't find it, and that's fine too. And then I do come up with questions. Usually it's 6 or 7 questions. I, for the most part, ask every guest a couple of the same questions because I really want to know their response to that question. And I didn't do it for this reason, but if I went through and cataloged the 75 or so entrepreneurs that I've interviewed and just focused on the response to the one question in common, that could be a whole podcast episode, that could be a book, that could be a blog post, so on and so forth.
And you mentioned the book, which I definitely want to get to in just a second. This prep, how long does it take you?
5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes. And do you write their intro when you do that, or are you using the pitch doc?
So what I'll do is I don't ever voice the intro or the outro live. I do the intro, or I do the interview first. Then I take the bio that they submitted and I will paste that to the top of the page. Then I will go in and edit their bio. I'll take out words that don't need to be voiced. I'll take out, certain accolades and then add what we like, key things that we talked about. So you're not going to ever see somebody's bio voiced by me verbatim to what you will see everywhere else.
Oh my gosh, they're the worst, right? You get one of these like 2-paragraph monstrosities.
And also, right, they're too long, and you don't need to know where the person went to. You don't even need to know where they went to college, but some people have like their high school, whatever, you know what I mean? So just make it as concise and to the point as possible.
Got it. So this is a little bit of legwork, but that saves you from having to get on that call, which blocks off your valuable time and that kind of thing. So very cool. Very cool. And also not live. I've definitely heard both. If you do it right, they can all sound good.
Oh, they sound live. It sounds live.
Oh, it sounds live. Okay. So it's not like, with the music behind, hey, the guest I'm about to talk to is really cool. But you do it in a way where you're introducing so-and-so, and then they just start talking.
Yep.
That's cool.
And I never start so when you hear my podcast, you'll hear the music bed, you'll hear the intro, and you won't ever hear, Hey, Casey, so nice to have you on the show. And then Casey says, hey, Natasha, thanks for having me. You don't hear any of that. You don't even hear my first question. You hear the response. That's what every single podcast starts with.
I love that. Tell me about your idea. Like, where did that come from? Was that a design you intentionally thought about to sort of organically evolve into that?
I think the pleasantries that we exchange are meaningful, but they're not meaningful for the listener, right? It's
Mm,
just wasted time. You may get someone hanging up on your show if you hear too much of the generic pleasantries. I am also, it doesn't look like it from my background, but a minimalist. And I really like to edit out the stuff nobody cares about because I want you to stay on. I want you to be like, oh, I can't leave now. Okay, well, okay, after they're done with this one, oh no, here, okay, I need to know the answer to that. So I
right.
really try to cut the fluff.
How far do you take that? Do you get rid of ums and because there's software now, you can get rid of
Yeah. I get
everything.
rid of ums and filler words for the video.
Mhm.
And my editor that does my podcast, he leaves a lot of them in for the actual audio, version. But if somebody's stammering or, we tend to, when we speak, say something again, and then repeat it again, and then get to the point.
You're killing that.
We're trying to erase all that.
You know what's interesting is it makes sense because all the way back to something you said earlier about the goal being of a journalistic nature. And tell me about what journalism means to you in that regard, because I think I come from the relationship camp. So I'm not as familiar with
Mm.
what does it mean to make a journalistic podcast, but I get the sense of where it's going.
I will say this, I am very talkative. I have a lot to say. I have a lot that I want to boast about. And when I find myself as the podcast host, chiming in with a story of my own, fulfilling my own ego, it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel bad about myself, and I'll cut it out. Now, in conversation or in coaching or in lots of different ways, I will share everything about myself. But I look to, um, the journalistic approach is I am this person and I'm trying to get information from my guest for my listeners. It's not an ego boost to me. It's not for me to prove to the guest or the listeners how amazing I am and that I've done this and that I've done that, or that I'm a great conversationalist or someone to hang out with. So now this isn't hard hitting news or anything,
Sure.
but I will tell my editor, I'll say, listen, I went on a tangent about myself. Get rid of it.
Wow. Brutal. Brutal. But you know what? That's so needed because I think for me, there's a balance, but I think it was a Rogan or maybe Tim Ferriss at one point was just riffing on podcasting and it was like, you just got to shut up and let it go because you've probably had this happen where someone's talking and they say something. You're like, oh my gosh, I totally have a story to share about that or something, but then they keep going and now they're on a different topic and you like, just let it go. You're not going to interrupt them. And so you can get your story out.
Yeah.
Crazy. So journalism, it's not about the relationship. It's about the end product. It's not about you as the host. It's not a vanity project. And there's plenty of things to talk about. To your point, like we could talk about you all day about the things that you do well. But when you're hosting, you're putting that spotlight on your guest.
Right. I am not an expert in anything as a podcast host, except for being able to ask really good questions of these people. So I do have to have a certain business acumen, a level of understanding to be able to meet that entrepreneur where they're at. And yes, I've interviewed people that have had much bigger businesses than I have, but I can still hold my own. And I won't turn down, a billionaire's request to be on the show. And I won't not ask a billionaire to be on the show because I don't think that I have the ability to meet them where they're at. I actually know I do. I can.
How do you do that? Tell me about that. And does it relate to celebrities as well, or just people in a different world
I
from
mean,
you?
listen, I'm 51 and I've had a lot of successes and I've had some really, really crazy low inflection points, but I've had the time to reflect back on all of those things. And I have a confidence clearly that allows me to do whatever it is that I want to do. And I don't really suffer from the imposter syndrome too often. And when I feel that coming on, I know exactly what to do to get rid of it. And it's to do research, learn, understand. And then sometimes that imposter syndrome comes from not having the experience. So what do? You get experience, you get experience, you get experience. Then it
And
just disappears.
okay, so you're going to talk to Richard Branson tomorrow.
No problem.
And that's because you've talked to other people like him so far? Or what would
Honestly,
you do? You research him?
this is a funny transposition. I think that I can talk to Richard Branson, Barack Obama. Like I'd love to have a conversation with Barack Obama. I don't know if I'd want to interview him on a podcast
Right.
because, he's got canned responses because he has to, right? But I have sung the national anthem for over 40,000 people at pro sporting events numerous times without a monitor and with no backing tracks.
Damn.
If you can do that, that's kind of my carte blanche. If I can do that, I really can do anything. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or it doesn't matter. Will I be excited? I mean, I don't know how excited I'd be to talk to Richard Branson. He's really interesting, but
Yeah. But let's say, and I hear you too on that idea. Have you had guests where they are that super canned thing? Because that kind of turns me off when I get
yes.
like the fake person.
Well, I have had on my podcast someone who was promoting her book and had
And her name rhymes with
and had $100 million business at the time. And I still wanted to have a journalistic approach, but she was like, just she was on, it was as if she didn't even need me there. And I could tell she was just saying the same, sound bites that she wanted to get in. And when people that I interview sometimes repeat their business name over and over and over, you get media training and you're like, okay, and remember to insert that's a little annoying. It doesn't happen that often though.
Same thing happened to me where it was an author. Sometimes the slippery slope. I mean, we're all authors here, but they can be too authory, and you just see this veneer.
So in my book, in the book, if you haven't read the book.
That happened to Rogan one time where he was talking to this one lady who wrote some books, and she kept answering every one of his questions with like, oh, well, it's in the book. It's in the book. He's like, well, could you tell me about it now a little bit, please? Like, what do I have to do to get you? Like, and everyone was thinking the same thing. Like, could you just please answer this? I'll go read the book if it's interesting. God, crazy. Speaking of books, tell me about your book expertise. We're talking just ever so briefly before we got started about you magically transforming things into books.
I've only magically transformed one thing into a book.
Okay.
It's the story of my life. It is a giant saga. And you could say it's rags to riches, but I've recently decided that, the core of the story is I went from literally, and a lot of people have done this, writing checks they know we're going to bounce for top ramen. Like that is not a special story, but going from that to being able to have paid out over $30 million to artists, talent, vendors, that's my hero's journey.
Yeah.
And so this book talks about the incredible challenges I had, and then how and this was reflected back to me, how I amplified every opportunity, both positive and negative, to its fullest ability, to its fullest capacity. And that's why I'm here before you now with this like ridiculous overconfidence. I've earned it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what I found out though with this book, which I love the most. So when I published the book, Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup to the Soul said, "What's your goal for the book?" And I was like, well, sheepishly, like I'd like to sell 25,000 because, that's a big number for me. And he said, "I won't be surprised if you will have sold 1 million by the next time we talk." So that gave me some confidence.
Wow.
What I had in mind was I want to see how many books I can sell. Yes, I know you don't make a lot of money selling books, but I still want to see the money. Guess what? I'm not paying attention to at all anymore. Number of books sold or the money. What I'm paying attention to is the impact that I'm hearing reflected back from my peers,
Mm.
entrepreneurs. And funny enough, a lot of men are reading the book, and I never expected that. And they are the most vocal with their underlines and highlights and, their DMs and emails saying like, "This is the book I wish I had the courage to write," or "Thank you for humanizing mental health." And like, "Oh my God, you know, secretly, this is," they'll tell me secrets. And what I think this book has done is showed, my fellow entrepreneurs, well, shit, if she can say this out loud, I might be able to start saying it too. And I put
Yeah.
things in that book that my therapist and best friend didn't even know about me. And here's
Wow.
a funny thing. My brother, who's 8 years younger than me, he read the book and he goes, good job, Tosh. That's a good book. It was written well. I don't know if I would have put everything in there that you did, but good for you."
So tell me about the process that it took to write that. Because I know now you're helping people do a similar
Mhm.
journey of getting all those thoughts onto paper.
I am trying to save you all, you, Casey, and everyone else I know from going through what I went through in writing my book. However, what I went through informed me of how to guide other people through it in such an easier way. I wrote maybe 50,000 words at first, had someone kind of coaching me, then thought irrationally that I needed a ghostwriter. I just didn't understand the term. What I needed was an editor. I
Mm.
spent a ridiculous amount of money on one particular editor who was referred to me, and I made the choice. I'm not going to blame the person that referred me or the editor themselves. I made the choice to believe in the fairy tale that this editor, who was also a top New York literary agent, who had published really big books, was
Mm.
going to be my ticket, the golden ticket. And the
Right.
truth is, she didn't have the skill to help me as an editor. And man, that was an expensive lesson. I found
Gosh.
another editor that was phenomenal. So maybe it was worth the wait. I don't know. But I have created a system and a structure for really busy entrepreneurs who cannot, like, especially ones that cannot, like, get organized, get their life story down. And it's really fun. And I just recently had a few of my students interviewed by someone because I didn't want to interview them and say, "Okay, so tell me what you liked most about my program." Okay. And so, like,
That's hard. Yeah.
right. So I had someone else interview them. And today I was going through the videos and I was like, oh my God, I am really impacting these people's lives. And I'm so proud. I want to send it to my daughter who's 27 and she'll be like, "Yeah, whatever, mom, you're so cool. You're helping so many people." But I'm 51, as I said earlier. I feel like my whole life has been research and development. And it's now at this point that I'm I'm just getting started.
Yeah. And do you have that itch where you've got one book and then you're like, I think I could write another one about that topic and that topic,
Yeah,
but do
there
it
are a
way better
few.
than last time?
Oh, definitely. Oh my God.
Yeah.
My writing has gotten so much better. I'm able to help edit other people's a lot better. And I think I'd be able to write my next book much better. I'll still need an editor. Everyone needs an editor, by the way.
Even editors need editors, people.
Editors need editors, especially. It's like therapists. You better have a therapist.
Your therapist needs to have a therapist.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. And I think I'm at the point in my life where, I was waiting for someone to save me and take care of me my entire life, scraping through, figured out some stuff. I took a lot, right? I took a lot of advantages. I took a lot of, I was a taker disguised as a giver to an extent, but now I'm really in a place where I want to help people get over themselves.
Impact, it feels so much more rewarding than everything else. It just takes a little bit of time to get to that point where you're like, yeah, actually, that was great. That was way better than this other thing. Circling this all back together, where do podcasts fit in? Can they help you in this book writing process?
I think that honing your voice, the person that you are, and the person you want to project, like the person that you're talking to me right now is very different than the person that my daughter is going to interact with later. But this is the person that most people that aren't my family are going to, right? And I have a definite voice, and I have a
is that because you're not yelling at me? Is that why? I'm not in trouble.
I feel like I'm yelling at you a little bit now. I'm confident because I've been on so many podcasts, but also I have refined my message and I've discovered my message, which is crazy. Usually you discover things in various other ways, but I found, especially as a guest, I'm discovering things about myself and about what this book is to me in real time, based on the questions that I'm being asked by the host.
Right. So you get some of the same questions and then your answer gets better and better. And
I'll give you an example. This
Yeah.
blew my mind. I was talking to this podcaster. I'm going to say his name incorrectly. It's Kevin, I think, Wathy. Anyway, he's young. He's in his 20s, I think. And we were talking about number of books sold. And I said exactly what I said. I said to Jack Canfield, 25,000. He said 1 million. And this kid comes up to me and he says in the podcast as the host, he goes, but isn't even thinking about 1 million books a limiting belief? I was like, are you kidding me? So
in which way?
I'm limiting my success to 1 million books and not more.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
But tell me, did that inspire you to sell even more?
Yes.
Okay, so that did.
To think bigger.
I wasn't sure if that was like patronizing or if that was like he was all about it. Okay,
it was pretty cool. I was like, I just had a wake up call from a vantage point, right, that I would never have encountered had I not put myself out there to various podcasts and other people.
Gosh, the magic of making a connection or having them ask you a question that put it all together for you. Yeah, that's that extra benefit of just
right.
It
opened that door that was never going to be opened, and nobody else has said anything similar to that to me before or after. So I really appreciate that.
Well, shout out to Kevin. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. That's Success Systems, I think. Is it his podcast?
Yeah, that sounds right.
We'll link to it. I found the episode with you in it.
Really interesting guy. You can hear it in there.
Okay, cool. See, now what a great pitch. He's really interesting.
He's really interesting.
But sounds like he's asking questions that are really helping things connect for his guests, which is just an awesome benefit as a host to be able to help either yourself or even your guest reach another level. That's amazing impact.
Yeah.
So cool. Sweet. Well, two more questions. We got super fast. Got to keep on schedule here. One, what is your biggest challenge with podcasting?
The stamina. So as a host, I only record on Thursdays.
Okay.
And I have someone taking care of all the pre-podcast and post-podcast stuff. But you will not believe this. I'm an introvert. So it's really hard for me to be on. And this is another reason why I don't do the pre-shows. I really have to conserve my energy because I am full on. I'm 100% with you right now, Casey. There's nothing on my screen. I've shut everything down. My phone's silent. I'm all yours and you know it, right? So I give that to my guests as well. Then I record, the intros and pop it into, and I'm tired. I'm tired after 3 interviews.
100%. Yeah.
And I wish I weren't. I wish I were the Energizer Bunny. I interviewed John Lee Dumas one day, and I was his 19th interview that day out of, I think, 20.
Wow.
So he spends one day as a guest a week and one day interviewing people. And he has a $2 million podcast, and he publishes his P&L for that podcast on his website. And he gave a pretty good interview. Would I give a good interview if it were 19th in one day? You know what? I would have canceled by then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it short? Were they like
15 minutes?
15 minutes.
Long enough.
Can you get anything done in 15 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can? Okay. So I should go, in your words, I should go listen to your interview with John, and that'll help me understand, because I'm kind of like that long form guy. My marketing podcast is like, it's a half Rogan in length. It's like time.
You know what? You need to do you. Everyone needs to do what is in their wheelhouse, what their zone of genius is. And, I can have a long conversation with you in person, but I don't know if my listeners would stay on. It's not that kind of a podcast.
And to be fair, you'd be exhausted after.
I couldn't do it. Yeah.
Unless we were serving, like, we had wine and we're just kind of.
I don't drink.
You don't drink? Okay.
I just
no caffeine either.
No, caffeine? I don't drink coffee either. It's weird. Now you're getting into the weirdness of me.
That's cool. That's the interesting part, right? That's the part you don't get in the bio.
Yeah. People are like, how do you wake up? I'm like, I don't know. Like
sunshine and actually sleeping.
I've literally never had a cup of coffee in my life.
In your life?
Never. No, I've had a sip and I'm like, that is the most disgusting taste. I do not want to acquire it.
Was it black?
Probably.
Because, Starbucks, they make things these days with like pumpkin, spiced, nutty latte.
I can taste the coffee in those disguised drinks and I don't like it.
Oh, it's okay. So, but you had a sip, so you at least have tried it, and you're like, no, thanks.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I guess that's how I am with cigarettes. So I guess I can relate.
I've never had one of those either.
Right. Yeah. I haven't even tried that. So, okay. Wow. So the challenge is just the resilience.
The emotional output that it takes to be really on and do a really excellent job.
Yeah.
And I do it in one day. I was doing them on random days. I'm like, oh no, because there's a different mental space that you have to go into.
Yeah.
To do this. So I'm like, that's my silo.
Super smart. Thursday seems like a really good podcast day. I know today's a Wednesday, but that's because I don't know. But tomorrow is even better.
I will be a guest on somebody else's podcast on a different day, because it is yet a different energy to be the guest. Yeah.
Can you tell me about that real quick? How do you mentally, what switch do you flip in your mind?
Well, I have to power the podcast as the podcaster. I don't have to power as a guest if you're a good host, right? And I know that I can just authentically be myself, and I want to give you all of me, and it's unlikely that you're going to trip me up. I mean, you can really ask me anything, and you could even try, if you want to, like, trip me up and see how I perform with the response.
Wow.
Right. So I'm just a lot more relaxed as a guest.
That's fantastic. So much there. I know I'm not going to challenge you to get uncomfortable, but I do want to know what your favorite ice cream is.
Rocky Road. And I don't really like ice cream that much, but Rocky Road if I have to eat it.
Okay. So if you were to sub out a different dessert, what would you pick?
I like something with a little bit of chocolate and a crunch.
Yes.
So anything with those two attributes.
See, you've boiled it down to the core archetype of the proper dessert, which means we can find one for you somewhere. Someone get me chocolate and crunch. No producers listening to this whatsoever. Final thing, shows evolve over time, and you've done so many episodes now. Where do you see your show going? Like if we talk again in 50 episodes, what do you think we're hearing?
I'm going to open up the show to include more types of entrepreneurs. At first, I wanted to really highlight high-level entrepreneurs, and I thought that was the demographic that was really important to me, and I think at that time it was. But I'm entering in a space now where I'm going to be helping entrepreneurs scale and grow their businesses between 250,000 and 7 million. And so I would be alienating some of those people. Also, I don't interview any coaches, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are coaches. I'm probably going to drop the mandate that you have to have full-time employees. I had a personal pride in hiring full-time employees and giving people a job. And so I kind of felt like I wanted to support other entrepreneurs that were doing that, but the world has changed. And there are a lot of people that don't want to be a full-time employee. So we're not necessarily doing them a disservice by hiring them as a contractor. So my mind is changing.
Yeah, love that. It used to be a badge of honor for me to how many full-time employees did you have?
Mhm.
And then you realize, oh, that just means every month you're paying a lot as well. So
yeah, my $1 million payroll pre-COVID didn't feel so good on March 17th, 2020.
Gosh, the problems just get bigger as the companies grow. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on here. Where can people connect? Let's talk about the book, the podcast, projects you're working, all that.
Well, hopefully by the time this airs, you can go to natashamiller.com and see everything. And there's a story behind that. Right now it's official natashamiller.com. I finally got the URL to my name after 30 years.
Wow, congrats. Did you need to negotiate for price on that bad boy?
Yes, I did. And I paid a very pretty penny for it, but it's worth it.
But you got
I
it.
just wish this gal would have realized the importance to someone like me to have that name. She never used it. She never was going to use it. And she stopped responding to any inquiries. And I was a performance artist. I have 7 CDs that I produced. I really needed that domain name. And for her not to have given it to me is a sad thing. I don't mind paying for it because I'm all about profit. I'm all about commerce and entrepreneurship. But yeah, I'm a little angry about that, if you can't tell.
A little bit. And that'll be on our therapy show, which is following this one. If people want to listen to the green room afterward. No, it's not, I understand. I was doing some negotiating as well for those things. I thought about just buying the company that has Cheshire.com and then keeping the domain name, and then whatever the company wants to do. Good for
I
them.
have a guy. If you need someone to do some deep, dark web, black market.
Yeah. Everybody needs friends in those places.
I got a guy.
You got a guy. Well, that's good. I think that's my takeaway from today. Natasha's got a guy. Thank you. So we'll send everyone there. We'll link to that site in the show notes. People can just click right through. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on here, being your real self, teaching me, schooling me things, showing me another way, showing me the journalism approach and all these different things. And I can't wait to read your book and learn more about you.
Okay. So this is my opportunity to say, whoever's listening to this, go rate and review and subscribe to Casey's podcast. And Casey, I'd like to have you on my podcast. So you'll get an invitation right after this.
Cool. And I do meet the criteria. So we're good there. But yeah, it would be an honor. I would love to. And yeah, thank you for this. And for those listening, if you learned something, and I know you did, because I have like 5 pages of notes over here, then share this episode with someone else. That's thought leadership. Get to like 4 people, 9 people, 3,000, doesn't matter the number. Just get this in front of the right people. Check out the book, go get Relentless, do a little book club with me, read it with me. And I can't wait to report back to everyone else. Again, Natasha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. This has been an exciting episode of Creating the Greatest Show. I will see you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.